Hey guys, it's me, Dax, and it's Leanne back with another one of our Eat, Play, Love, Live questions. And this one is about, why do I find it so hard to control myself? So, you know, the common thing is sometimes I feel so strong and so in control, and some days I feel like an absolute crazy person, powerless to control myself around food. Leanne, why is this?
A couple of main factors come to mind. The first one being like, are we playing a game of control or are we playing a game of freedom? And so, whenever we're restricting ourselves or controlling ourselves or trying to put ourselves in some sort of parameters, we're playing a game of control. And then we are looking at it like it's something that either needs to be controlled or we need to control ourselves, policing ourselves, monitoring ourselves. And so there's a couple things that keep us struggling with that. First of all, without going too deep into the brain side of things, when we get into that comparison part of our brain, the ACC, the anterior cingulate cortex, when you look at control, you're usually looking at it as this is a good versus bad thing. This is right, this is wrong, right? It's a black or white, right? And so that's the game that our brains are playing. Well, what happens off the back of a control game is anytime you feel like you're playing the game correctly or well, right, you feel great. But anytime you don't, that's when shame, blame, guilt, and comparison come on in. And that is just this vicious cycle, right? So what is the alternative to that? Well, to me, it would be playing a game of freedom. How can you create choice as opposed to restriction, or taking away choice, right? And so that really comes into the whole concept behind Eat, Play, Love, and Live, is setting yourself up for a game that you can win based on freedom, permission, choice, and pleasure. But the other thing that came to my mind around this is the distinction between am I reacting or am I responding? And when I'm reacting, I'm always going to be acting according to what's coming at me and feeling like I'm not the one in control, versus responding like I feel able to respond. And so the big thing that makes us, that kind of determines where we are, whether we're reacting or responding, is this idea of threat or stress to the brain. So when I'm in my relaxed state of my brain, I feel like I'm very in control of my actions, right? It's when I feel like there's too many variables, when I'm actually in threat or in stress, when I feel like I have to make a decision, when I feel kind of weakened, so to speak, then I'm in this reactive mode. And I just kind of, food, for example, in this conversation, tends to control me versus me feeling like I influence it. So then it becomes like, how can I, really monitor, so to speak, or influence my state of being so that I'm the one really influencing it. And that's kind of what it comes back to, is the distinction between influence and control, right? When you look at yourself or your program or your plan or any of the variables as something to be controlled, you're going to be in that game. Like, there's no in between of good, bad, right, wrong, right? Versus when you're influencing it, it then becomes a question like, am I doing my best to influence myself to my fullest extent? So that's just some of the things that came to my mind. It's a big topic, but what would you say around it?
Yeah, I agree with everything you just said there, so I don't have to say anything. No,
Okay,
I
cool.
agree with
Goodbye.
I agree with everything you just said. I think one of the things that people don't really seem to pay very much attention to is the fact that whenever control is applied to anything in their lives is when they find themselves in the greatest levels of rebellion, right? You're in a relationship with someone, they try and control you, the friends that you're going to see, and when you can and can't go out, right? Most people would say, hey, I'm not putting up with this. You take on a job, and an employer becomes aggressively controlling in the workplace. Your very first thing is that you want to rebel. Right, you're kind of at school. The more controlling the teachers were, the more hassle they got off the students, because it's in our general nature. It's built into us that whenever we find ourselves being restricted and confined, that we want to break out and break free. And we seem to miss the big picture that inside of our own lives, we are putting all of these control elements in that kind of says, well, I must always, you should never eat this, you should always eat that, you've got to go to the gym this number of times per week, you've got to get your cardio in, never do these. And the more of these absolute rules, the more of these control elements find their way into our lives, the less happy we become. And this is how this is how we know that control is a bad thing, right? As in, it's not an awesome thing for us to apply to our lives. And the reason is control is in the opposite direction to happiness. The more control elements you find in anybody's life, you think about a prisoner, someone in prison, they're told when to get up, when to go to bed, when the lights are on, when the lights are off, when they have to go and eat their meals and everything else. It's not exactly a happy existence. A lot of us, unfortunately, we build a prison-like existence into our life by the times and the places and the things we can and the things we can't, the things we must and the things we mustn't do. And all of these things actually start to kind of wear us thin. And as they wear us thin, we generally tend to rebel.
Right.
And so, and this is where it seems nonsensical. You say, but damn it, I really want to get in good shape. Why am I kind of raiding the fridge for Haagen-Dazs at 3 a.m., but I know for a fact I want to get in good shape? Well, the more you've put the control element in, the more your brain is going to seek for a way to return you back to happiness.
Right. No, absolutely. And I think that is, what determines whether or not we're reacting or responding. It kind of comes back to like, am I living with rules, or do I have the tools that I need to be equipped with to make the decisions and be who I want to be? It's this tools versus rules side of things that's going to keep us in a position, if we can, instead of focusing on like, how can I control things, right? Focus on like, how can I put myself in a position where I'm able to respond, and I'm not feeling like a prisoner. And to me, control is, the driving force of perfectionism. Which I know a lot of women that are watching this video are struggling with big time. So I think you raise some huge elements to this, and it really becomes this decision to be made of, am I going to live with freedom, or am I going to live with control? Because the truth is that whatever your decision is, that's going to determine whether or not you're always reacting or responding to your life and to your outside circumstances. And then it always comes back to that internal bubble of resilience, of your ability to be strong in yourself and stand in your power. So awesome.
Right. And so just to kind of finish out on that, there's a real simple test that you can do to find out whether you're kind of living a life of control or you're living a life of freedom, right? Ask yourself the question, how else? Relative to the thing that you're doing, how else could I do this? How else could I get into great shape? Because if you've just got you must eat less and move more, and that's your only paradigm for getting into great shape, then you're living a life of control. But if you say, well, how else could I get into great shape? Because I promise you, there are people on the planet right now that aren't kicking their ass in the gym every day and they're not starving themselves. There are people that do Tai Chi and yoga gently and kind of they drink wine in the evenings and they eat good foods and they're still in amazing shape. So the question becomes, how else?
Right.
If you believe that there's only one way to do it, you're living a life of control. And if you're living a life of control, you are, even if you're not unhappy now, you're likely to become unhappy pretty soon.
It becomes a conversation of how can I have both rather than either or.
Right.
Awesome. Right. Awesome. Great. Well, this is Leanne and Dax signing out for now. Thanks for joining in, ladies.
Take care.